Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And today I am talking about the new Apple original series titled Severance, created by Dan Erickson and directed by Ben Stiller. I don't talk about TV shows that often here, but when they are worth talking about, you will find me reviewing them, especially from a storytelling perspective. And this series is kind of a dystopian, sci-fi, dark comedy, drama. Yeah, I think it fits in all those categories, and it's something completely new that I haven't seen ever, maybe, or in a long time anyway. I feel like it's borrowing from different properties, but it is its own IP, and thank you for doing that. I am so tired of sequels and remakes and adaptations. Thank you for creating an IP. And this is one of those rare occasions where character and plot are both amazing. They marry together to create a very compelling narrative. And this show doesn't get everything right, but I would say it gets most things right. But let us move on to the review and talk about this show. So what is the hook? What is Severance about? Picture this. We see a man weeping into his hands alone in a car. He trudges across a lonely parking lot to enter a building that reads Lumen on the exterior. He walks through the lobby to an elevator where it appears as if his spirits are lifted somewhat, where a literal switch is flipped in his head, and that is the procedure known as severance that allows us to essentially completely sever our consciousness in two distinct parts, one always being outside of the office and one being inside of the office. So imagine that. You could have a clone of yourself working all day, and then you kind of essentially wake up from a dream, from sleep. You don't even experience any of that. You do not have any memory whatsoever of working, and you are living your life at home up until you have to enter that building, and more specifically, enter that elevator. So what did I think? Well, let us begin with character because, again, amazing work here. And I'm going to go through each of the main characters and try to explain what made them so compelling and why they work as a whole. Before I go on, there's a couple of terms I would like to establish here, and that is an outie and an innie. And I'm not talking about belly buttons. I'm talking about the terminology that these characters refer to as each other, or the way people in this world refer to them. So an outie being the half of the consciousness that is not at work at Lumen, and the innie being the other half within the company. So let us move on to Mark, our POV character, our protagonist, if you will. He has gone through a terrible trauma. He has lost his wife, and no, that is not a spoiler. But what's interesting here is that he's not completely different while he's on the inside. His gait is a little bit lighter. He is clearly not suffering, but I really appreciated the fact that they didn't treat the innie and the outie as a harsh division of black and white. It's not like he's moping and depressed all of the time on the outside, or extremely happy on the inside. Because the narrative and the character development of the show is done so well, we already know his pain. We see it on his face. It is shown to us. It is not told to us. Eventually it's told to us, but we're already empathizing with him by that point. An interesting thing with him is we do see a nice contrast between him and Helly, who's the character I'm going to talk about next. So even though really these people are prisoners in this office, they only experience life inside this office, he seems content to a degree. And you wonder why. You wonder if there is some kind of barrier that he may be able to cross into the outer realm to see or experience the consciousness of the Mark that exists on the outside. But as the narrative progresses, we see those lines begin to blur as our catalyst, who is Helly, I'm going to talk about now, interferes. She kind of mixes things up at Lumen. So the unique thing about Helly is we get to experience what Severance is like firsthand. We get to see the horror of it. She wakes up, doesn't know where she is, doesn't know why she's there. She's in a boardroom, screaming, trying to get out, while Mark is trying to quell her fears and explain to her exactly what's going on here. So, I mean, just imagine that. You're waking up, you have no idea where you are, why you're there, and it's essentially a nightmare. And this is the first time we get to witness the psychological horror that Severance can cause. So while Mark is our POV character, sort of looking at things from the outside, Helly is the character who we experience things on the inside from the very beginning of the procedure. She's asking all of the questions that we are asking as the viewer. Why am I here? Why would anyone want to do this? I'm a prisoner. I'd rather die than be in this place. And on that note, she goes to extremes to prove her point, to show her struggle, to show her complete torture of what it's like to be waking up in this nightmare every single day. So Dylan, our next character, I always want to push this guy's glasses up on his nose. They're always seeming to ride right on the tip of his nose. And to me, that feels like not only for visual entertainment, but a metaphor for what's going to happen. He's wisecracking, but like in a deadpan sort of way, so he can be very serious at times, almost like a tough guy attitude, and it's such a great contrast with his stature and just his physical appearance that it works so well. However, as we move our way through the story, we begin to see a little bit more of who he really is through the perspective of his Audi. And I might add that Mark is really the only person for the vast majority of the story that we get to see the contrast. We get to see outside in the real world and then inside on Lumen. The rest of the characters, while we do get to have glimpses of their outer lives toward the end of the series, Mark's character by far has the lion's share. But Dylan's banter is great. He was one of my favorite characters by far. And I feel like his personality really brought a lot of levity to an otherwise very dystopian setting. All right, Irving, the sweetheart of the show, proper romantic, passive until he's not. We get to really see him grow across the course of this narrative. He is the heart of the show, and that's what I love about it. All of these characters are distinct archetypes that both complement and contrast with each other, which is really what you need in great character work. He actually has one of the other dominant narratives in the show, and it does link with another character, but I don't want to get into that. I don't want to spoil it for you. Just know that his thread is quite interesting, and it does echo into the real world on the outside. All right, next up is Bert. It's Christopher Walken. What else needs to be said? I don't think anything does, but he's more of a peripheral character in this, but what's great about him is he interacts with one of the other key characters, and he gives us another glimpse of a phase of employment at Lumen, which is very illuminating. All right, let's talk about the antagonist now. Let's start with Milchick, who is a very formidable force. He has this kind of permanent smile on his face, even though you can see right through it. It almost has like a Clockwork Orange kind of vibe to it, and he is there to keep order. He is there to reward and punish. When they do well, they have these weird things where they're like melon socials, or egg socials, or strange dance parties. Yes, there's a lot of gonzo stuff in the show, and I completely love it because, again, it provides such a contrast to the darkness. This is not a 100% bleak show. I think what the show is trying to say is very bleak and really a cautionary tale, but because we have these punctuated moments of humor, it really is a great break from that. All right, Harmony, one of the big bosses at Lumen. I don't want to get too much into her story because she does perform a very unique role here, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but she presents a very frightening, devious, and resourceful character that was a great antagonist and a great narrative device to this entire show. All right, let's talk about the plot. So this entire thing hinges on a mystery. What is Lumen doing? What are the characters doing? They're called refiners, whatever that means, but they just are looking at these retro-looking computer screens that look kind of like a mix from the future and from the 80s, solving these kind of number puzzles that are completely in abstraction. And there's also other groups that appear as if they are preserving art maybe, or doing 3D printing. It's really difficult to tell, and I think that's the beauty of this thing, is that everything they're doing is an abstraction for something else. And that just makes the mystery even more interesting to try to unfold. And like I said, Helly is really the catalyst. So we have all these people who are seemingly content at Lumen, even though they are trapped here, right? Day in and day out. She is the one who pushes them to dig deeper, to look farther into what is actually happening here, and start to make them question things. And her role kind of takes a backseat toward the end once they're all on board with the situation, which was kind of a strange development because I thought she was going to play a larger role, which she kind of does at the end. I don't know. I don't want to get too far into it because, again, I want this to be as spoiler-free as I can. But what really makes Severance special are the questions it asks. What if you could have a clone of yourself, which essentially was you, but always at work, so you never had to experience work again? What would that make them feel like? What are the ethical implications of it? Great science fiction always asks questions. We like to think of technology as always progressing us further, but this is a cautionary tale. This shows the downsides to what a lot of people might view as progress. Because them on the outside, the outies, are not experiencing what the innies are experiencing. They're ignorant to the entire thing, so they don't see the suffering or potential suffering. But us as viewers on the outside, we get to see both, and so we get the opportunity to experience the full gamut of what these characters are going through, and that is what makes this show so compelling. This is a great exploration of what the cost is for our comfort. I'm going to briefly mention the production design because it is amazing. Everything from the set design to the color palette to the strange sets is completely perfect. Not only tonally, but metaphorically, because when you're inside Lumen, you're seeing this somewhat comfortable yet somewhat claustrophobic environment that these characters have to exist in. And there are no windows also. I think think that's a big part of this whole thing. And then on the outside, you can see a grittier look at reality. I don't want you to think this is like science fiction with these smoke towers pumping filth into the air and kind of a Blade Runner setting. It's very much looks like the world today. It's interesting in the fact that it's tough to pinpoint exactly what time period this takes in. We can only assume it's the near future because of the technology they implement. All right, well, the show is not all perfect. There are some cons for sure. The first one being that, as with many TV shows, there's some sequences, some scenes in here that I felt could have been cut. It felt like there was a little bit of fluff. I don't want to say that it is a massive detriment whatsoever. I absolutely love the show, and I'm really just trying to reach for criticisms here at this point. And also, there's another thing narratively that kind of bothered me throughout, and the fact that there are cameras literally everywhere in this entire facility. You can see them on the walls, in the hallways, on the ceilings, everywhere. And yet the characters seem to be able to kind of sneak around and get up to their shenanigans and talk to other groups. And maybe that's part of the plan. Maybe they knew exactly what was happening. Maybe they were watching the whole time, but they didn't let us know that. So I can only speculate at that. And then the end, the finale. Well, we are left with a bit of a cliffhanger, let's say. Now, I'm a big fan of leaving things open. I love cliffhangers, but knowing that we have to wait an entire year to see the conclusion or maybe the next step or the next phase in this narrative makes it a little bit upsetting. There are some questions answered. There are some things revealed, but it almost feels like if they would have given us a little bit more to close things off and then dangle that carrot of what's to come in our face after that, I think it probably would have been better and probably will upset fewer people, let's say. That is why I'm going to give Severance a 9 out of 10. A great concept with a new IP. You rarely see stuff like this. Great writing from the character to the plot to the setting to the set design, all of that. But really the show feels like someone wanted to create art. They wanted to tell a good story. This was not about politics. This was not about trends. This was not about pocketbooks. This was about someone who wanted to tell a great story, and I think that's really what we all want. So thank you out there for creating this show. I am so happy it exists. So go watch it. Please go watch it. This show really has single-handedly renewed my faith in episodic storytelling. So if you'd like to support the channel, like the video if you like this, subscribe for story-related content, and if you'd like to see my own work, check out my books in the description, or you can check out my series, Worth 1,000 Words, where I write a 1,000-word short story inspired by a piece of artwork every week. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for watching, and go watch the show. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.